this one. And this
Can you speak up for Marge?
one. Can you hear me, Marge?
Yes, I can.
We can definitely hear you. It's like you're speaking into a microphone there. Loud,
Oh,
loud. and
oh,
clear.
yes, I can hear you.
No, we can hear you great. Back where you were.
Oh,
think-
okay.
I think that's your microphone range right there. Oh.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so we in First Kings, the beginning of First Kings, the last couple of weeks we've seen basically we didn't see David die, but just kind of he got old, says he got old, and then and then he passed the kingdom on to Solomon through a promise to Bathsheba at some point, and Nathan got involved, Bathsheba got involved when David's third oldest son, Adonijah, felt that it was his rightful place to take the throne, and he steals the support. Hello. He steals. Oh no, we're just started. Steals the commander of the military, Joab, and also steals one of the high priests, their support, and with them comes the support of many others, and so. They have their own little celebration party for Adonijah's rule when there they are partying and they hear all this commotion down near the Gihon Spring. Well, that's because is it Benaiah and oh man, I can't think of the names now. They have anointed Solomon king, and they're starting their celebration, their coronation parade into the city. And when Adonijah hears this, he panics and he runs to the altar, grabs hold of the horns. That is set up. If you read in Leviticus, you will find that that there are areas set up to run to if you think that you might be murdered, killed or something. And so, and it's pretty typical in ancient Near East when a family member accedes to the throne, that all possible claimants to the throne were eliminated. So Adonijah, he's got a rightful worry with Solomon being crowned and blessed by his dad, David. So he runs there. Well, I think we get into it today. If we, so I can't remember. There's been a lot going on. But let me go ahead and start sharing our screen here. We're in First Kings, the end of chapter 2. Share screen and in presentation mode. I can see it down there. I can't see it. There it is. Is that it? There it is. Okay. So yeah, First Kings chapter 2. Okay, good. This is where I wanted to start. So yeah, that's where I left off with what I just finished. So verse 13, starting in verse 13 of chapter 2 of First Kings. Then Adonijah, son of Haggith, came to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. She asked, "Do you come peaceably?" He said, "Peaceably." Then he said, "May I have a word with you?" She said, "Go on." He said, "You know that the kingdom was mine and that all Israel expected me to reign. However, the kingdom has turned about and become my brother's, for it was his from the Lord. And now I have one request to make of you. Do not refuse me." She said to him, "Go on." I like how the conversation, and you make this into a play. Bathsheba just sitting there, "Go on, go on, go on." He said, "Please ask King Solomon, he will not refuse you, to give me Abishag the Shunammite as my wife." Bathsheba said, "Very well, I will speak to the king on your behalf." Now, remember when he ran to the altar and grabbed the horns, that when Solomon heard it, he said, "Go bring him here." And so he has Adonijah brought before him. Adonijah pleads for mercy. Solomon says, I'll grant you mercy. Just don't do anything stupid from now on." We're seeing Adonijah do something stupid here. He is asking to be given Abishag. Now, Abishag was the one that they hired to take care of David in his old age, remember? She was to lay with him and keep him warm, although it specifically says there was no sexual interaction going on. It was just, she was to care for him, keep him comfortable. And now here is Adonijah asking to have her as his own.
Someone with an intimate with the king.
Well, she definitely
Well, yeah.
was the kings, yes, the previous kings, and he's not. Now it was common practice that when a new king came into power, that they controlled the previous harem, if you will. They controlled the previous set of concubines and I won't say wives, but concubines certainly. We saw that when Absalom took over. He went in. Remember, he went in and he slept with a lot of the concubines that had been left over. David had left 10 to care for the palace while he was in exile, and Absalom slept with them. And that's an act of what the rightful king would normally do. So Absalom, obviously, we read what happened to Absalom. So here's Adonijah now asking to have this Abishag as his wife. That's not good news. That's a stupid thing for him to do. Verse 19. So Bathsheba went to King Solomon to speak to him on behalf of Adonijah. The king rose to meet her and bowed down to her. Then he sat on his throne and had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat on his right. Then she said, I have one small request to make of you. Do not refuse me. And the king said to her, make your request, my mother, for I will not refuse you. She said, let Abishag the Shunammite be given to your brother Adonijah as his wife. King Solomon answered his mother, and why do you ask Abishag the Shunammite for Adonijah? Ask for him the kingdom as well, for he is my elder brother, and the priest Abiathar and Joab, son of Zeruiah, are on his side. Then King Solomon swore by the Lord, so may God do to me and more also, for Adonijah has devised this scheme at the risk of his life. So what this is basically saying is by asking for Abishag to be his wife, he is laying claim for a future part of the kingdom. Because even if there wasn't any relationship between Abishag and David, any child that's produced from that has a rightful claim to the kingdom. And Abishag asking for, Adonijah asking for Abishag, if they have a child, it legally becomes David's child because as the right of succession. But Adonijah now has a say he has a claim to the throne through the son or the child that they have together. So this is what Solomon is upset about, is he showed mercy to Adonijah, and here is Adonijah basically staking a claim to the throne. It's treason.
But he sends his mother ask.
Well, he sends Solomon's mother. Yeah.
Makes the request for her son's rival.
Yeah.
Well, this is where I got in trouble. I think I told you when we were talking about the David Bathsheba story that I had a very detailed discussion with my classmates about the rape of Bathsheba, and due to her position in the kingdom, the scripture says that she and Uriah lived in the home that's very close to the palace. Of course, the closer to the palace you are, the more important you are. Uriah was a hired mercenary, and apparently a very well-off hired mercenary. So Bathsheba, and Uriah living as close as they did to the palace made them important. She is an alien. She is not Jewish. And I made the argument that even if the possibility exists that she was looking for a way to raise her status in the kingdom. That we can't discount that. Oh, man, all the, all the classmates, I agree with him. I told him, I absolutely believe it was rape, but I also have to look at I'm looking at this from a judge, from a judge point of view, I've got to look at all the possible scenarios. If any kind of reasonable doubt can be given. So anyway, I'm trying to make a case for David, is what I'm trying to do. So anyway, yeah, so here you've got Bathsheba, who has risen from being an alien to the queen mother now. I think I don't know what she thinks. I still have that same kind of judgmental attitude in that maybe she's still trying to increase her status within the kingdom. I don't know. What I do know is that if she was an alien, and as I mentioned earlier, that the ancient Near East kingdoms often, in fact, more likely than not, killed any even potential claim to the throne, any of those people. And for him to still be alive, maybe she's thinking, maybe she has that mindset that, well, this is the way I get rid of him now. He made the mistake by approaching me. I'm going to take him out. I don't know. I don't want to paint Bathsheba in a bad light, but we don't know. So
Who knows what her relation was?
she loved her son. We know that. She loved her son. And what was Solomon's real name? Uh-oh. It only gave it once.
Yeah.
They named him the Beverly Hillbillies.
Jethro.
No, the other one.
Jen.
Jedediah. Yeah. Okay.
Very good student.
You'll remember the Beverly Hillbillies. That's how I heard it.
Jethro in the Bible.
Yeah, there was. That was Moses' father-in-law. Yeah. So, verse 24. Verse 24, this is Solomon still speaking. Now, therefore, as the Lord lives, that's the second time he's used that phrase, who has established me and placed me on the throne of my father David, and who has made me a house as he promised, today Adonijah shall be put to death. So King Solomon sent Benaiah, son of Jehoiada. He struck him down and he died. Benaiah is obviously the new general, since Joab has switched side. He basically declared his allegiance to someone else, and he's no longer in the picture. And anyway, so we'll leave it at that. Verse 26: the king said to the priest Abiathar, "Go to Anathoth to your estate, for you deserve death." Abiathar was he was the priest that went with Adonijah. Okay. But I will not at this time put you to death, because you carried the ark of the Lord God before my father David, and because you shared in all the hardships my father endured. So Solomon banished Abiathar from being priest to the Lord, thus fulfilling the word of the Lord that he had spoken concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. So the line of Eli has finally ended. That prophecy was given by Samuel before Saul was even king, that the line of Eli will come to an end. So remember, Abiathar is the grandson of Phinehas, and Phinehas was one of the evil sons of Eli. So, okay.
Remind me who Eli.
Eli was the priest that raised Samuel. When Samuel was presented to the temple, Eli raised Samuel. When Eli died, during Eli's reign, his two sons were kind of head priests too, and they were the ones taking those big giant forks and reaching in and taking God's portion from the offerings. Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay, y'all weren't here when we were going over that. You'll catch on quickly. Yeah. Now, so Adonijah has been deposed or, taken care of. Abiathar's been taken care of. Now we get to verse 28. When the news came to Joab, for Joab had supported Adonijah, though he had not supported Absalom, Joab fled to the tent of the Lord and grasped the horns of the altar. When it was told King Solomon, Joab has fled to the tent of the Lord and now is beside the altar, Solomon sent Benaiah son of Jehoiada, saying, go strike him down. So Benaiah came to the tent of the Lord and said to him, the king commands, come out. But he said, no, I will die here. Then Benaiah brought the king word again, saying, thus said Joab, and thus he answered me. The king replied to him, do as he has said, strike him down and bury him, and thus take away from me and from my father's house the guilt for the blood that Joab shed without cause. So Joab is finally, met his match, but he has everything that has happened, everything that Joab has conspired over the course of his history with David is all coming back on his own head. So verse 32, the Lord will bring back his bloody deeds on his own head, because this is Solomon speaking, because without the knowledge of my father David, he attacked and killed with the sword 2 men more righteous and better than he, Abner, son of Ner, commander of the army of Israel, and Amasa, son of Jether, commander of the army of Judah. So shall their blood come back on the head of Joab and on the head of his descendants forever. But to David and to his descendants and to his house and to his throne there shall be peace from the Lord forever. Then Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went up and struck him down and killed him, and he was buried at his own house near the wilderness. The king put Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, over the army in his place, and the king put the priest Zadok in the place of Abiathar. Now we get this idea from Exodus, chapter 20, verse 14, that says, if someone willfully attacks and kills another by treachery, you shall take the killer from my altar for execution. So even though it was not,
It was supposed to be a sanctuary, but it wasn't.
correct, there were times when killing at the altar could take place, and this was one. Okay. Verse 36. Then the king sent and summoned Shimei. Shimei was that one that cursed David when he was coming back into town after Absalom had tried to overthrow things. Yeah. So, and said to him, build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, and do not go out from there to any place whatsoever, whatever. For on the day you go out and cross the Wadi Kidron, know for certain that you shall die, your blood shall be on your own head. And Shimei said to the king, the sentence is fair. As my lord the king has said, so will your servant do. So Shimei lived in Jerusalem many days. What happened was when Shimei cursed David, Shimei was one of the last followers of Saul. Even when Saul and Jonathan were dead, Shimei still insisted that the house of Saul was in charge. They were the ones who were supposed to be in charge. So he cursed David. Well, David ran into him again after Absalom had died, because Shimei had thrown in with Absalom, because he was looking to overthrow Absalom later on too. He sought David out. They ran into each other, and he begged for mercy. And David promised him, "I will not kill you." It's very important to notice that David said, "I will not kill you."
My heart is
Right. But yeah, somebody else might. Yes. So verse 39. But it happened at the end of 3 years. So between that verse and this one, 3 years had passed now. That 2 of Shimei's slaves ran away to King Achish, son of Maacah of Gath. So he's run away, and the slaves have run away to Philistia. When it was told Shimei, your slaves are in Gath, Shimei arose and saddled a donkey and went to Achish in Gath to search for his slaves. Shimei went and brought his slaves from Gath. When Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and returned, the king sent and summoned Shimei and said to him, did I not make you swear by the Lord and solemnly adjure you, saying, know for certain that on the day you go out and go to any place whatever, you shall die? And you said to me, the sentence is fair, I accept. Why then have you not kept your oath to the Lord and the commandment with which I charged you? The king also said to Shimei, you know in your own heart all the evil that you did to my father David. So the Lord will bring back your evil on your own head. But King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established before the Lord forever. Then the king commanded Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck him down, and he died. So the kingdom was established in the hand of Solomon. So apparently Solomon, in his own way, has taken care of any active revolt, any active people that may be able to lead a revolt.
So in verse 42, the king is Solomon.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. And then a little note there, Shimei was the last influential followers. Okay, so on to chapter 3, verse 1. Solomon made a marriage alliance with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. He took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he had finished building his own house and the house of the Lord and the wall around Jerusalem. The people were sacrificing at the high places, however, because no house had yet been built for the name of the Lord.
What were they sacrificing?
They were basically, I'll go into that here in just a minute. Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of his father David, except that he sacrificed and offered incense at the high places. So what is happening is that Solomon begins making these treaties through marriage with the nations around him that are potential enemies. But if you keep in mind that Chronicles tells us that David prepped everything for the building of the temple and for Solomon to use and all that, what Solomon is doing is he's also concreting the promises that David had, or concreting the treaties that David had. Too, by having these marriages with other kingdoms, they were less likely to attack or less likely to go back on their word of promise for offering people to help work, for offering materials to help that kind of thing. I do make a note here. Rehoboam, Solomon's son, his first son, was probably born to Solomon's wife Naamah, who was an Ammonite, before this alliance. Because when we get later on and we start hearing about the division within the kingdom beginning to happen, we're going to find out that Rehoboam was 52 when he took the throne. But when you do the math, Solomon had only been in charge for 51 years or something like that, or maybe it was 30. Anyway, it comes out to 1 year more that Rehoboam was older than Solomon had married or had married them. So Rehoboam is probably a young toddler. The reason he took Naamah as a wife is because the Ammonites were a vassal state to Israel. David had conquered them years ago. So now we have, because we're going to get into Second Chronicles. I think we watched this once before, but I'm starting it at the Second Chronicles part. So
If we did, we've forgotten.
right.
Yeah.
Marge and Arlen, I don't know whether you'll be able to see this or not when I start this. You may be able to hear it, but it's not that long, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
After David dies, we move into Second Chronicles, which focuses on kings that lived in Jerusalem. And again, there's lots of overlap with First and Second Kings, but there are many key differences. So the author has left out all of the stories about the kings of northern Israel, so he can just focus on the line of David. And there's lots of new material about these kings from David's line. He highlights the kings that were obedient to God, and he adds new stories about how their obedience led to success and God's blessing. But he also adds new stories about kings who were unfaithful to God. They didn't follow the Torah, they led Israel to worship idols, and these kings faced horrible consequences, all leading up to Israel's exile.
Yeah.
Looks like a state
So this whole
Texas highway.
becomes a series of character studies where the author wants later generations of Israelites to learn from their family history, and so become faithful to their God and the Torah. Now, the book's conclusion is really unique too. At the very end of the book, the king of the Persians is named Cyrus, and he
No.
tells the Israelites that they can go back home, return from exile, rebuild the city and the temple. And he says, last line of the book, whoever there is among you, of all his people, may the Lord his God be with him, and let him go up. And that's how the book ends, with an incomplete sentence. Now, of course, the author knows about the first return from exile and the stories of Ezra and Nehemiah, but clearly, in his view, the prophetic hopes of Israel were not fulfilled in those events. And so, this incomplete ending shows that the author's hope is set on yet another return from exile, when the Messiah will finally come to rebuild the temple and restore God's people. And so the book of Chronicles, the final book of the Jewish scriptures, it ends by pointing forward. It calls God's people to look back in order to look ahead, because the past has become the source of hope for the future. So Chronicles concludes the Old Testament as a story in search of an ending. And that's what this book is all about.
Okay. Yeah, the Bible Project is an interesting thing.
The books, the first and
No,
second
no, no,
Chronicles,
no,
while they're two
Oh,
separate
no.
books in our Bibles, that division is not.
no. Okay. I only did that in there because we're gonna read from Second Chronicles. We're doing the Second Chronicles because this adds those additional details. So Solomon summoned all Israel, verse 2, by the way, the commanders of the thousands and of the hundreds, the judges and all the leaders of all Israel, the heads of families. Then Solomon and the whole assembly with him went to the high place that was at Gibeon, for God's tent of meeting, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, had made in the wilderness, was there. But David had brought the ark of God up from Kiriath Jearim to the place that David had prepared for it. He had pitched a tent for it in Jerusalem. Moreover, the bronze altar that Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, had made was there in front of the tabernacle of the Lord. And Solomon and the assembly inquired at it. So the ark, remember, David brought into Jerusalem. Remember, he was dancing, so much that he probably exposed himself and made his wife Michael mad. So it's in Jerusalem. So it has traveled with them since its creation in Exodus. It ended up at Shiloh for a time. Then, during a battle at Shiloh, the Philistines stole it, and then they have all kinds of problems with it. They freely give it back. And it ends up at Kiriath Jearim. They experience some issues. They send it to Nob. Remember, Nob is where David originally fled from Saul. And when Saul found out he was there, he sent his troops and killed all the prophets there at Nob. From Nob, it goes to Gibeon, and that's where they had set up the ark and the altar and all that. But then the ark was brought to Jerusalem. But the tabernacle, the tent, and the altar remained in Gibeon. So the ark came to Jerusalem, but the altar remained in Gibeon. That is why Solomon keeps going up to the high places. Is he either has to go to Gibeon to make there's two lines of thought here. Number one, he's either have to go to Gibeon to make his correct sacrifices, or he has all these political alliances. And his wives are influenced. Well, I won't say his wives. He's being influenced to sacrifice to other gods too. Remember that what made the Israelites so different from all the others is that their God could move. Their God wasn't stuck in one place. But there's still an idea of, and I haven't talked with y'all about this too much. There's still an idea about a pantheon of gods. And Elohim, which is plural gods, Elohim is still the chief God over all the gods. And so Solomon may be sacrificing to some of these lesser gods. Again, it's conjecture.
Yeah.
So,
They say for God that works.
well, we know, we assume that, that's part of our faith tradition, is we assume. And they had one almighty God. Anyway, did that answer your question, or we get a little further into?
Is it okay to have The bronze, or what was
The
it?
bronze altar, yeah, that was dictated in Exodus when they were carrying it around, that when they stopped for any kind of period of time, they would set all this up. The bronze altar was one of those that was set up for that. Now, when the temple is built, they'll get some new instructions. They'll build a gold altar along with the bronze altar. So, yeah. Okay. So now we get some cross-referencing between First Kings 3 and Second Chronicles 1. In some of these, the Chronicles gives more detail. I'm only going to stick with the Kings. So if you want to read along in the Chronicles section, you can. First Kings 3, verse 4. The king went to Gibeon to sacrifice there, for that was the principal high place. Solomon used to offer 1,000 burnt offerings on that altar. At Gibeon, the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask what I should give you." And Solomon said, "You have shown great and steadfast love to your servant, my father David, because he walked before you in faithfulness, in righteousness, and in uprightness of heart toward you. And you have kept for him this great and steadfast love, and have given him a son to sit on his throne. And now, O Lord my God, you have made your servant king in the place of my father David. Though I am only a little child, I do not know how to come out or come in. And your servant is in the midst of the people whom you have chosen, a great people so numerous that cannot be numbered or counted." This idea of "I am only a little child" has created some controversy among scholars, because for some of us that take scripture in a literal sense until it doesn't make sense to, I don't know what to do with this. I'm only a little child. Well, obviously he wasn't too little, otherwise David wouldn't have left him in charge of the kingdom, or at least we assume that. So the other line of thinking is that it is a metaphor, that he is young as a king.
Yeah.
So, like I said, I have difficulty with it because I'm a literalist until it doesn't make sense to, and so
But Solomon's not being literal.
maybe not. Maybe from my perspective, maybe not. Yes.
I knew a lady that was an only child and her mother died and she had to clean out all the stuff and she complained and she's like 65, okay? So she's saying, "But I'm only a little kid having to clean up and it's like, oh, woe is me."
Well, you would think that, but also I've learned that when something doesn't make sense, to read further. And so, yeah, we're getting into the crux of why Solomon is so special to us. Okay, even though we've seen him do some not so nice things already, why he's so special to our and to the Jews. Verse 9, "Give your servant therefore an understanding mind to govern your people, able to discern between good and evil, for who can govern this great people of yours?" It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. God said to him, "Because you have asked this, and have not asked for yourself long life, riches, or for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, I now do according to your word. Indeed, I give you a wise and discerning mind. No one like you has been before you, and no one like you shall arise after you. I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honor all your life. No other king shall compare with you." That's wrong. Solomon is not considered the best. "If you will walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and my commandments as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your life." Then Solomon awoke. It had been a dream. He came to Jerusalem, where he stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. He offered up burnt offerings of well-being and provided a feast for all his servants. And then that line in Second Chronicles 1, chapter 1, at the end of verse 13, it says, "And he reigned over Israel." So, yeah. So he goes in front of the Ark of the Covenant. So he's in Jerusalem, back in Jerusalem now, and he's actually offering a burnt offering and offering the well-being in front of the Ark of the Covenant, which is basically a symbol of his devotion to God as king, that I am dedicating my kingdom, my rule to you. So, so, I mean, that's it for today. next week, we'll be hearing about judging. And that'll be that famous story about two women and their child. Hiring, so we start setting about getting the people in place and then starts building. We're gonna find out some interesting things about the projects that he's doing because it is grand. We're gonna spend several weeks just talking about the temple and the palace and everything else, how the stones were hewn, where they were cut. We're gonna unfortunately be getting into these ideas of cube. You're gonna be sick of the word cubit by the time we get done with this section.